I'm Jolene Wynn, and this is the Porn Addict's Wife podcast, episode number 197, What to Do If He's Not Taking Responsibility. Hello, my lady. If you have a spouse that is struggling with a pornography problem, then you are in the right place. My name is Jolene Wynn, and I am a life coach, a member of the LDS faith, and the wife of a former porn addict. And in this podcast, I am going to teach you how to change the way that you are affected by your husband's choices. We can't change him, but what we can do is change the way that you respond when he makes the decisions that he does. I'm going to teach you how to manage your brain, how to process all of the emotions that seem so overwhelming to you so that you can finally live a life where you aren't living in fear of triggers and relapses. And by learning how to manage your mind and process your emotions, you are no longer going to be running on an emotional roller coaster, but you are going to start feeling so much more in control of your life no matter what your husband is doing. And I'm going to teach you all of that on this podcast. I can't wait to get started with you, and I'm so glad that you are here. I promise you, you're in the right place. All right, my ladies, good morning and happy President's Day. Today is actually my daughter's 12th birthday, and that seems crazy because I feel like I just had her yesterday. And she already opened up her presents this morning. It was very Harry Potter themed. That is her favorite thing. And it was just, she's so fun. And it's so fun to have her, and I can't believe I've been a mom for 12 years. It seems crazy. And my husband and I actually just got back from Las Vegas. My husband and I were there this weekend. If you guys follow me on Instagram, at Jolene Wynn Coaching, you guys saw that I was in Las Vegas this weekend visiting my grandpa. That's where he lives. And we spent a couple of days just driving around. And he's 93, ladies. And he, I think, could outlive all of us. I think he could for sure outlive me. And I wouldn't be surprised if I also lived to be 100, because his parents lived, my great-grandpa was 101 and my great-grandma was 98 when she passed away. So my grandpa could live for a good another decade, which seems insane. And he's just hilarious. And we tried to get out of him at what age you are when you stop caring what other people think and you just say your opinions really loudly, and he says he's been doing it his whole life. So I don't know at what age it becomes age appropriate to just lose all of your filters, but he's totally there. So it made for a good time and a hilarious weekend, and it was really good to see him. So we got back last night and decorated for my daughter's birthday, which is something that we do. Not a lot, but we just, not like intense decorations, but we do like a little balloon arch in whatever color they wanted. So my daughter chose gold. And so I did some gold balloon arch and set up for her birthday. And this morning we had a birthday, and it's been so fun. So I am glad to be back with you, and I am excited to dive into this topic. This is something that came up quite a bit last week and has come up so many times. And so I'm excited to dive into it today, which is, what do we do if he's not taking responsibility? So that's what we are going to dive into today. I have a lot of notes, so let's get going. I have gotten a lot of messages along this line of, if he's not taking responsibility, or it's actually his problem, why do I have to do all the work? Or it's not fair, right? It's like, this is his problem. He's the one that introduced this into our marriage. Why am I the one that has to heal? Why am I the one that has to do all of the work? Why am I the one that's putting in all the effort? So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to cover all three of those things, okay? So number one, let's talk about if he's not taking responsibility. Now, the thing that we want to get really clear on here is, notice what you actually want him to take responsibility for. That's the very first question that we want to answer is, okay, so let's say he's not taking responsibility, but let's ask, what is it that you want him to take responsibility for? Now, there could be two things. One is his actions. So let's talk about that first. If he's not taking responsibility for his actions, the reason that that is so difficult is that it's very difficult to accept that that's not within our control. Okay, what we actually want him to do, I want you to notice that taking responsibility for your actions is saying, yes, that belongs to me. Yes, I did that. Okay, what our brain actually wants him to do is we want him to admit it, right? Part of us thinks, I want you to get really clear on what your definition of responsibility is. What do you want? What would it look like for him to take responsibility? Here's the answers that I've gotten. One, you want him to admit what it is that he's doing. Now, ladies, unless your husband is concealing it from himself, he probably has admitted, at least in some degree, that he is watching pornography, right? If we're talking about taking responsibility for his actions, admitting that is watching pornography, most of your men are already there. Most of them are admitting that, now whether or not they say it's wrong, they are admitting that they are watching it. Okay, so he's already doing that, but that's not all we want, right? We don't want him to just admit that he's doing it. We know that he's doing it, okay? But then part of us also wants to apologize, okay? That's some of the other definitions that I get when people say, I want him to take responsibility for his actions. They say, what they really mean is, well, when we dive into it, they say, well, I want him to admit that he's doing it and I want him to feel bad for it. I want him to apologize. Well, I can't actually make him feel bad for it. That's up to him, whether he chooses to believe that it's right or wrong. And some of your men believe it's right and some of your men believe it's wrong, and that's totally up to them. I can't change that for you. But I also know that him apologizing doesn't make it feel any better. Maybe a little bit, but not in the long run. We think that him apologizing is actually part of him taking responsibility, and it's not. They're two different things, okay? So I want you to notice that in your brain. If your brain thinks that him taking responsibility for his behavior, for his actions, looks like him apologizing to you. And again, I've done episodes on this before, which is, I think if you're waiting for an apology or something like that, go back and listen to those. I think it's if you're waiting for an apology. Because I've taught on this many, many times, and I'm not going to dive into it, but just a little bit, is that an apology is not going to make you feel any better. Because he could come to you today and say, you know what, baby, I am so sorry for how I've hurt you. And you could be like, that's it? That's your apology? Like, that's what you are giving me after all that you've put me through? I deserve you to be groveling at my feet with a fresh bouquet of red roses every day for our entire marriage. Like, if his apology doesn't look like how you think it should look, or if you don't think it sounds sincere, or if you don't think he's said it enough times, then it's not going to count. Does that make sense? So notice if you're waiting for an apology because you think that will make you feel better. Ladies, I promise you it won't, because you have your thoughts about his apology, and that's what's going to create your feelings. Okay. So that was just like a little side note there, is notice if him taking responsibility for his behavior in your mind looks like him apologizing. Okay. Because whether or not he does that, we have no control over that. Okay. What most of us think sneakily, most of us have a very sneaky definition of responsibility in our brains. And what that means is we want him to change his behavior. That's typically what we think responsibility is. We think that if someone took responsibility for their behavior, they would acknowledge that it was wrong and they would change it. That's what we secretly want. So if we're being really honest about the definition, I really encourage you to get curious about what your definition is of him taking responsibility, because you need to get really clear on where your brain is operating. Because if it's sneakily wanting him to admit it, he probably already has, or apologize, he might have already, and it's not going to make you feel any better. Or it could be that you want him to start changing his behavior. And if he does that, awesome. But if you're using that as your definition for responsibility, if he never changes, you will always be waiting. Okay? So let's say he's not taking responsibility for his actions, whatever that definition looks like to you. One of the reasons why our brain hates this is because it's an acceptance that this is not within our control. Okay? Ladies, we can't actually control whether or not your husband takes responsibility for his behavior. We can't control whether he changes, whether he admits it, whether he apologizes. We can't control any of that. Okay? And our brain hates that because it feels very powerless. So one of the things that our brain hates is feeling powerless, because we feel very vulnerable. It feels like we could die, right? Which is what our brain is designed not to do. And so what it wants to do is try and change it. So we will do more, trying to change his behavior, trying to influence his behavior in some way so that we feel like we're doing something. Because doing something gives us a false sense of control. Doing something feels better than not doing something. This is why our brain often turns to worry, because it feels really productive. Worrying about something that we actually have no control over feels productive. It gives us a false sense of productivity. And in the same way, when we try to do more things to influence our husband's behavior, it gives us that same false sense of productivity, that same false sense of control. We don't actually have control over his behavior, but doing more things feels better than accepting that we can't do anything at all. Does that make sense? We don't have the ability to make his choices for him. And that's a very hard thing for our brain to accept. It's a very uncomfortable emotion because when you think, I have no control over him, you feel very out of control. You feel very powerless. And if you don't know how to feel those feelings and process those emotions, then what your brain is going to do instead is react to them, shut them down, distract, push them away. And that's what we end up doing, right? So we do more trying to change his behavior or influence it so that we don't have to feel the way that we feel. Okay? It feels better. Even this false sense of control feels better than not being in control. The problem with this is that we end up getting burnt out. We can't live there very long because we are running off steam, okay? And we're trying to control something that we can't. So we just spin our wheels. This is why we feel like we're on a roller coaster, on a hamster wheel where we are just going and doing all the things and nothing is changing. This is why, because we're trying to control something and influence something that we actually have no control over, and it'll never work. Well, the sneaky thing, the tricky thing about this is that this is actually our brain taking responsibility for something we have no responsibility for, because he's a grown man and he can make his own choices, even ones we don't like. And when we are trying to influence his behavior, we are subconsciously trying to take responsibility for his behavior. And I'm going to do an example of that in a minute. But we need to learn to stop, or we don't need to, but we can. What I want to offer is that you can learn to stop taking responsibility for his actions and then decide how you want to move forward, even if he doesn't change. That's what this podcast is all about. That's what my coaching program is all about, right? So let's do an example of this. The one that I see most often, one that we talked about last week in that class that I did a class last week all about sex and pornography. And if you want to watch it, you can go enroll in my Confident Sexuality Masterclass. It's an online course that I have on my website, and you can go and you can get into that. This is what we dove into. We talked about this in depth so many days in a row last week, okay? Is one of the ways that we want to influence his behavior is through sex. Because we have this disbelief, because we believe this lie that pornography and sex are correlated, that because pornography is sexual, that it's about sex, then we think that there's something that we can do to influence whether or not he watches pornography, right? If pornography is about sex and we are his sexual partner, then maybe there's something we can do. Right? This is our brain again saying, I hate that I can't do anything to change whether or not he's watching pornography. And so what it does is it makes a connection. It keeps a thread. Okay. And it says, all right, well, maybe there's something I can do. Remember, I just said how we do more trying to influence his behavior. Maybe there's something I can do to change what he's doing. Okay. Maybe if I put out more, maybe if I say yes to more things, maybe if I'm more adventurous in the bedroom, maybe if I put on more lingerie, maybe if I lose weight, maybe if I'm more attractive, blah, blah, blah. Our brain goes into all of those things and we try to do more or change our sex life or our sexual behavior in an attempt to influence whether or not he's watching pornography. Okay, sound familiar? Now, the problem with this is that it doesn't actually work. Number one, because he's not reaching out to pornography because of a lack of sex. It's not happening, okay? And I've talked about that a ton in this podcast, okay? But another reason why it doesn't work is because you can't actually make his choices for you. And this is your brain sneakily taking responsibility, because if you think that there's something that you can do, then you are inserting yourself into the equation. You are saying, maybe I am a part of the equation of why he's watching pornography. And if that were true, then there would be something that you could do to fix it. And that's you taking responsibility for his outcome. Then you would somehow be minutely responsible for why he's watching pornography, and you're not. Do you guys see this? Does this make sense? So your brain is keeping this small thread of connection between pornography and sex so that it can sneakily take responsibility for his behavior. And I want to offer that you let that go. It's much harder. The reason it's very appealing to keep this lie, to keep this tether, to keep this thread between pornography and sex, because it gives us that false sense of control that our brain likes so much. It's much harder to let go of that thread, even as disturbing as it is, even as much as we hate it and we wish that pornography and sex weren't connected at all. Our brain likes to keep that connection, because otherwise we have to accept that there's nothing we can do. And that's a very difficult place to be. Our brain is wired to not feel powerless. It feels very vulnerable, and vulnerability means that we might get hurt and we might die. And that's what our brain is wired to avoid. So that's one of the reasons why our brain wants to take responsibility for what he's doing, even if he's not. So crazy, right? Okay, now let's go to the other part of responsibility, right? So we talked about if he's not taking responsibility for his actions. Now I want to talk about what you think he should be taking responsibility for, right? Number one was his actions. Number two, often ladies, we want him to take responsibility for how we are affected. That's what we want him to take responsibility for most of the time. Yes, we want him to take responsibility for his actions, but most of the gentlemen, again, are well aware and are acknowledging that that's what they're doing, okay? So most of the time, what we actually want is for him to take responsibility for how we are affected. And we don't want him to just admit it, right? Many men do. Many men are admitting that they know that you're affected. They know that you're sad. They know you're upset. Whether or not they think it's wrong, whether or not they think it's your fault, they can acknowledge that that's what you're feeling, right? They see that you're upset. They acknowledge that that's where you are. Many men admit it. And we don't just want him to apologize. Again, many of your men are apologizing. Some are not, okay? And that's not okay. I think he should apologize. Ladies, on the record, I think he should apologize every day, every hour. I think he should grovel. I think he should buy you all the pretty things. And I think he should apologize every day to you, for sure, okay? But many men are apologizing or have apologized. My husband has apologized to me many, many, many times. And yet I have noticed my brain many times in the past thinking that it's not enough, right? We don't want him to just admit. We don't want him to just apologize. We want him to take it away. That's what we want. We want him to make it all go away because our brain thinks that it didn't start until he was watching porn. And so if he's the cause, then he can fix it. And my brain was there at one point. I even told this to my husband. He said, I'm so sorry that I broke you. And I said, that's okay. Maybe if you broke me, maybe that means you can fix me. I wanted him to take it all away. I wanted him to do the magic wand and have the romantic idea of the knight in shining armor that comes and makes everything better. And that's what we want, ladies. We want him to take responsibility for how we are affected, how we're thinking, how we're feeling, how much pain we're feeling, all of the triggers that we have to deal with. We want him to take responsibility for that. And we want him to take it away. We want him to change it. We want him to do the work so that we feel better, right? But ladies, it doesn't work like that. If that worked, I would be shouting it from the rooftops. I would say, all we need to do is get your men into these programs. And if we can do that, then you will feel better immediately. But as any of you know, if your husband has started to move forward and progress and heal and isn't relapsing anymore or is getting better and on the path and you still feel like garbage, you know this doesn't work, right? Because even if he admits and apologizes and changes his behavior, he can't take responsibility for your feelings because he's not the one creating them. And this sounds terrible, but it's the best news ever because this means that you have control over it. Ladies, this is the emotion that you are waiting for. The opposite of feeling out of control or powerless is feeling empowered. And that's what I want to offer you. When you allow your thoughts and your feelings to be, when you think of them as something that he controls, then you are powerless. Then you are waiting for him to change his behavior so that you can feel better and heal and move forward and all of those things. But if you recognize that your thoughts and your feelings are within your control, then you don't have to wait for him anymore. Now, the problem with this is that then our brain gets lazy, okay? So I just gave you the best news ever and I said, you can move forward today. You can start to heal your thoughts, your feelings. How you are affected by this is 100% in your control. And most of the time our brain says, well, that's not fair, right? That's what our brain says. If you guys remember, it's like, well, it's his problem. Why do I have to do all the work? That's not fair. Ladies, here's the truth. You don't have to do all the work. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to listen to this podcast. You don't have to go to any groups. You don't have to hire a coach or a therapist or do any work at all if you don't want to. You can do nothing if you want. And you can wait and you can hope he changes. But even if he doesn't change, you won't change unless you take responsibility for what you have responsibility for, which is how you are affected. Even if he changes tomorrow, you aren't going to change. You aren't going to feel better. I have so many women that thought that come and work with me and coach with me and they say, I really thought that as soon as he started to heal and get better, and as soon as he started working on things, then I would feel better. That's when everything would move forward. But here he has been working on stuff and he's been clean for X number of years and I'm still a mess. Yes, because you still have your thoughts and your feelings, and those are within your control, which again, ladies, is the best news. Because do we really want him to be the one that's in control of how we think and feel? Is that really the person we want to be in charge of all of this? Absolutely not. He's probably going to do it wrong. He's going to do it slower. He's going to do it the wrong way. And we don't need that. What we want is to feel better. And ladies, that's within your control. And you're going to do it better and more effectively than he can anyway. So you might as well be grateful that it's not left up to him. He can't even handle himself, ladies. Let's not put him in charge of you too, right? Now, here's what our brain often thinks, right? If we think, okay, well, why do I have to do all the work? And the idea, the reason that our brain gets so upset is because it's lazy and it doesn't want to do the work, is that one of the things that our brain will go to is say, okay, well, what are you saying? Like if it's up to me how I'm affected, does that mean I'm overreacting? Are you saying this is all my fault? Are you saying that he's off the hook? Does that mean that he didn't hurt me and that I condone his behavior? No, ladies, I'm going to answer it again. Does that mean you're overreacting? No. Does it mean that he's off the hook? No. Does it mean it didn't hurt you? No. Does it mean you're okay with it? No. Does it mean that you condone his behavior? No. All it means is that you give yourself permission to heal and move forward and take control over your own life. That's what it means, okay? It means you stop taking responsibility for what's not yours and you start taking responsibility for what is. It's that simple. Our brain has a lot of hesitation about this. Our brain resists this a lot because it thinks that it means that if I sit here and I tell you that you can heal and move forward even if your husband is watching pornography, then it means that you're okay with him watching pornography. And that's not what I'm saying at all. Just because you can choose your thoughts and process your emotions and manage your mind does not mean that you then have to give up all of your moral compass and decide, hey, I'm totally cool if my husband watches porn. I would never tell you that. I'm never going to be okay with that. I'm not okay with it. Okay? I'm not okay if my husband watches porn. The whole point of learning to control what is in your control is to then know that you can choose all of this on purpose rather than feel like you are living at the effect of somebody else's choices, which if you don't understand your thoughts and feelings and you don't understand what's creating them and how to control them, then you do feel like you are living at the mercy of your husband's behavior. But when you learn how to manage your mind and process your feelings and control what you can control, then you understand that everything that you think and feel is within your ability to control. And if you want to change some things, you can. And if you don't want to, you don't have to. I choose to believe on purpose that I'm not okay with my husband watching porn. And I don't think you should be either. I'm not okay with pornography in general, and I don't think you should be either. That's my personal belief. And I know that believing that means that if my husband watches porn, then I will probably feel a lot of negative emotion. But I do get to choose that, and I have chosen it on purpose. And choosing it on purpose is what gives me all of my control. I am no longer at the mercy of my husband's behavior because I have chosen how I'm going to be affected by it. And there's a very big difference, right? Now let's talk about it being unfair. Okay, that's the other thought. Or that's not fair. It's his problem. Why am I the one that has to do all the work? That's not fair. Okay, fair doesn't mean equal. I've done a podcast on this, and I think it's called Fair or Things Being Fair or something about the word fair. You can go look it up. Okay. All right. Fair doesn't mean equal. We use the definition of the word fair very incorrectly. Just in our vernacular and the way that we talk, we don't use the word fair correctly. We think it means equal. We think fair means the same. It doesn't. I always give the analogy of sports. If a game ends and one team wins and one team loses, does that mean that it wasn't fair? No. As long as they played by the rules, it was a fair game, even though it wasn't equal, even though the outcome wasn't the same. Okay? Fair doesn't mean the same. It means that it follows the rules. And the rules of emotion and agency are such that we can get hurt by the actions of others. But staying hurt is up to us. Okay, let me say that again. The rules of emotion and agency. Okay, agency, the choice that we have, the choice that your husband has to do things, and the choice that you have to stay with him in a relationship, the choice that you made to be connected with him and to be in a relationship with him, the rules of that are such that you can get hurt by the actions of others. When you choose to engage in a relationship with another human being, you are saying, all right, I know that there's a possibility here that they might hurt my feelings. Whether that's a friendship or an intimate relationship, you can get hurt by the actions of others. When we put ourselves in proximity with other people, we know that there's a potential for us to get hurt. We don't often think about it that way, but our brain subconsciously makes that calculation, which is why if it thinks that there are people who are more dangerous emotionally, then most of the time you will steer clear of them. Does this make sense? If your brain says, I'm more likely to get emotionally hurt by that person, I don't want to be around them. Your brain will tell you this. This is why if you have a friend that gossip behind your back or spread rumors about you in high school, then you didn't want to be friends with that person, right? This is what our brain is saying. It's saying, I get hurt by that person. I don't want to be around them. Totally fair. All right. Those are the rules of the world when you interact with other human beings. There's a potential for harm. Okay. Emotional harm. Okay. That's what we're talking about. Somebody else can hurt your feelings. We can get hurt by the actions of others, but staying hurt is up to us. What our brain thinks is unfair is that we got hurt by the actions of others. It's actually not unfair at all. It's actually the definition of fair. It's playing by the rules of sociology, the rules of interactions with other humans. Is that always positive? No, but that's also what gives us the potential for positive, right? Those interactions that we have are amazing. And not only do they give us the potential for hurt, but they also give us the potential for connection, right? And that's what we get here. We're just talking about the flip side. We never complain about the interactions. We never complain about us feeling positive because someone gave us a birthday present. We never talk about how we don't like that other people send us a beautiful text message on our birthday, right? That's not the part that we think is unfair. We're not saying, well, I think it's unfair that, so-and-so said something and it made me feel good. No, we love that part. We just get uppity about the fact that it also goes in reverse. And that's what our brain doesn't like. Our brain wants to resist that. And that's what it says is unfair. But it's exactly fair. It's following the rules. Now, here's what we get to decide. We get to choose whether or not we stay hurt. Whether or not you get hurt by somebody else's choices, sometimes it's just the result of their agency. Yes, you get to choose how you think about it. But again, if your husband's watching porn and you're not okay with it, then you're going to feel negative emotion. Now, whether or not you carry that emotion around with you for the rest of your life is entirely up to you. Okay? That's what I mean by staying hurt. Staying hurt is up to you. That emotional baggage you're carrying around that is constantly being triggered, that is up to you. If you have that today, it's because you're choosing to keep it. Mostly because you don't know how to do any different. And that's not your fault. No one's taught you that. That's what I teach. Okay? Now, again, I'm not suggesting that you pretend that you're okay with it. You can continue to not be okay with it, to not be okay with your husband watching porn. But there's a difference between not being okay with it as it happens and holding on to the past such that it festers into bitterness and contempt. When you don't overcome the pain of the past, then it just stays with you. And it doesn't just stay with you, it boils and it festers. And it creates discontent and it creates bitterness and resentment. And it comes out in lashing out in unexpected ways, in unrelated ways. It comes out in the tone of voice where you talk to him. It comes out in how you tense when he holds your hand. It comes out in your interactions in front of your kids. It's not something that can just be swept under the rug. Does this make sense? Yes, how you are affected in that moment is something that you can handle and process. But more importantly, and I'm not saying that you're okay with it. Let's say I have processed all of the emotional baggage of my past. I've processed it. All of the pain and the heartache and the betrayal and the worthlessness and all of the negative emotion that I felt from my husband's pornography addiction, I have processed it. Now, if he watched porn today and he came and told me, I would feel negative emotion that I would then need to process. But then it would be up to me whether or not I kept that and let it fester again. Does this make sense? And so many of you are just keeping past emotion. And that's what our brain is designed to do because it's wired for us to survive. And it thinks that it's really important for us to avoid pain in the future by reminding us of our past. The problem is that it doesn't actually work that way. Just because we remember the pain of our past doesn't mean that we're not going to get hurt in the future if we're still married to the same person and he's still doing the same action and we keep that emotion with us. And then even if you leave, which a lot of women choose, which is totally fine if that's your choice, but a lot of women leave thinking that if they leave their spouse, then that emotion will go away, and it doesn't. It's still under the rug. Everything that you swept under the rug is still under there until you go clean it out and it shows up in the next relationship or the next relationship that you don't have because of the trust issues that you've still kept under the rug. Okay? It doesn't just magically go away. It doesn't disappear. You have to go clean it out, which isn't always fun. I'll be honest, it's not my most fun thing ever, but here's the beautiful part about taking responsibility for your thoughts and feelings is you not only take responsibility for the negative, but you also get to start taking responsibility for the positive. Because if it's true that you can be in charge of your thoughts and feelings and you can choose how you are affected by things, then you can choose to allow yourself more positive. And again, we only have so much emotional capacity within us. And when most of that is taken up by all of the emotional garbage that we haven't let go of yet, then we are reducing the amount of positive emotional space. We are reducing the potential the positive emotion that we could feel. We are actually unintentionally making our lives more negative because we aren't creating space for the positive. It's all taken up. All of that emotional baggage in your life is just keeping you 90% full of emotional baggage. And when you actually process that and let it go, then you have 90% more space for potential positive emotion and experiences. Isn't that beautiful? That's why it's so powerful and empowering to start taking control and responsibility for what you actually have responsibility for. Okay? Now again, ladies, if you're thinking, well, why do I have to do it? It's not fair. The truth is, ladies, you don't have to. Nobody is making you. But you're miserable as you are. So part of you wants to, right? It's your life that you're changing, not his. You can't lose weight for someone else. And if you aren't in shape, him going to the gym won't solve your problem, okay? Sometimes that's what this is like. And I know that sounds crazy, but that's exactly what we're doing. We're saying, I'm out of shape, and I want him to go to the gym so that I feel better. That's never going to work. And that's what our brain is saying. Our brain is saying, I don't like where I am right now. I don't like how I feel. He should go change his behavior so that I feel better. I mean, it sounds ridiculous when we put it in this context, but that's exactly what's going on in our head. Our head is saying, our brain is saying, our primitive brain is saying, I feel garbage. I don't want to do the work. Let's have him do the work and then maybe I'll feel better. It's never going to make you feel better, ladies. And do you have to do it? No. But it's available to you. And is not doing it working for you? No. Not doing it doesn't make you feel any better either. So you might as well try it. And I promise you, if you try it and you come work with me, I promise you, you will feel better. You will get the result that you're actually looking for, which is the thing that you want when you want him to take responsibility. So if he's not taking responsibility for it right now, I am so sorry. But the better question is, are you? All right, ladies, I love you so much. It's time to start taking responsibility for what we can, to let go of what is not our responsibility. And that is what's going to enable you to feel empowered and start moving forward today. I love you, ladies. I'll talk to you next week. Take care. All right, ladies, it's time to rise up and take charge of your healing, and I have the best way for you to do it. I have created a lifetime access coaching program that I have designed specifically for you and exactly what you're going through right now. This is where I help you develop a personal mastery of all the tools that you're learning here on the podcast in order for you to create a permanent change. Go to my website, jolenewind.com. You will find all the information there and you can sign up today and we will start going forward. I can't wait to see you there.